Hi, we're here this morning with Jackson Maynard, running for the 10th Congressional District here in Thurston County. Jackson, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for your time this morning, Kelly.
So happy to have you here. You're our very first Zoom candidate meeting, and I'm so happy that it's you. I want to ask you a few questions so that people can get to know you and learn about you as a candidate for Congress. I want to start with what's motivating you, what has motivated you to run for office?
Yeah, absolutely. The bottom line is I want to help. The country is facing one of the most difficult crises that it's confronted in its history. There are 30 million people out of work, and that number is probably going to increase. In the 10th Congressional District alone, over $154 million has been paid in unemployment benefits since this crisis started. And I really believe that I have the experience, the ideas, and the motivation to try to come up with ideas and find ways to serve the district to confront this crisis. I'll tell you as well, one of my most treasured mementos that I've got in my office is a thank you card that I received from President Ronald Reagan. I had sent him a get well card after he was shot during his presidency. I must have been about 6 years old. And for me, Ronald Reagan was really, the formative president that enabled me to understand what conservatism is, what leadership is, and the way that he confronted difficulties, but he confronted them with principle, and he communicated a clear, conservative, but positive message. That is the type of energy and principle and messaging I want to try to bring to the 10th Congressional District.
You mentioned experience. So can you talk a little bit about what qualifies you to be in Congress? Like, that's the first place I look when I look at a candidate. What qualifies you for Congress?
Sure. So I have spent 20 years of my career either volunteering or just in the positions I've held serving people, whether it be as I started my career as a prosecutor, later as a construction attorney for a state transportation agency, and for over a decade, including 8 years in service to the Washington State Senate, I advise legislators on major policy issues involving criminal justice and transportation. So I've been in the room when those negotiations happen. I understand how the legislative process works, and that is the experience I want to bring to the United States Congress on behalf of the 10th Congressional District.
So that leads me to another question, and what qualifies you for Congress. I know that you have a wonderful family, and whenever I look at a candidate, that's the first place I go to, because great men and women always have great families. So can you tell me a little bit about your family and a little bit about your faith as well?
Absolutely. So as far as my family, I have a wife of 19 years. We met in law school. She's also an attorney and accomplished in her own right. And then we have 3 beautiful daughters. They're teenagers, and we have our hands full keeping up with their different activities here in the Olympia area. As far as my faith, it has been a core part of who I am really since I was about 8 years old. I've often looked in whatever job I've done to the line in Matthew that says that you must be, in order to be the greatest, you must be a servant of all. And it's that model of servant leadership that you've seen in many different people pictured in the Bible, but also in Christ, that I would like to bring to the 10th Congressional District. I want to be a model servant in trying to find ways to help make things better for the people in the 10th Congressional District.
Well, I want to ask you a question now about state politics, and then I have another question about what's happening at the national level. So here in Washington State, we've seen a high level of fraud with our unemployment funds going out to people in Nigeria, of all places, to the tune of $100 million. Do you have some comments about that, and like what should be done to stop that from happening?
Absolutely. I think this crisis has revealed some real problems with the institutions that are designed to protect us, whether it be the state or schools, or even with the federal government with the way that the stimulus money was distributed in some of the small business loans. I responded to the calls as general counsel of the Building Industry Association of Washington when construction was shut down from countless folks, either phone calls or emails, just absolutely desperate and frustrated with government. And the fact that $150 million has disappeared due to the negligence of our government officials is absolutely outrageous, and really demonstrates the problems and some of the cracks in our system. And I honestly believe that part of being a legislator is to maintain proper oversight over those agencies. And that is something I'm committed to doing. But I think it also reveals a larger problem in just handing out checks in the form of stimulus. I understand why that strategy was used, but in my plan to help with economic recovery, I want to focus on rebuilding infrastructure so that when that money is being spent, and it's trillions of dollars, at least people can get a new airport or a bridge or a road or a new ferry vessel or something tangible that can help them move goods and services throughout the state. And they've actually got something that helps create jobs, as opposed to just handing out checks, which has been the strategy up till now, and which we're seeing is a strategy that has some flaws.
So that leads me to another state-related question. What do you think about the restrictions that have taken place in Washington state and the phased approach of our governor in reopening our state's economy?
You know, the governor needs to open up the state as quickly and as safely as possible, period. I get that it's an extremely difficult situation and decision, and I have no doubt that it weighs heavily on him and his staff, the fact that over 1,000 people have died of this virus. But as I've said before, there is an economic cost, but also a cost in lives to keeping the entire economy shut down. And I'm glad to see that he has taken some initial steps to reopening it. I'd like to see that move more quickly. And really, as far as the country, we need to move as quickly as possible and as safely as possible to open up our state.
Well, that leads me to a question about national politics and something as a member of Congress, which would be very concerning to you. I'm just going to read you this note that I have here that, let's see, $2 trillion has been spent so far to help people through this pandemic, and we were already $18 trillion in debt here in the United States. So this cost is huge. And how are the feds going to cover this? Like, ultimately, somehow, some way, it's going to have to be paid back. What's Congress going to do about this?
Yeah, you can't get blood from a turnip, and some of the proposals that are floating through Congress of increasing taxes dramatically are just nuts to me, especially when we have so many people out of work. So the idea that you're going to try to somehow collect taxes from people who are out of work and on unemployment is just crazy to me. So it's also disturbing to me, the idea that we would just continue to borrow more and more money from China and pass on that debt to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That is not a model that is sustainable in our future. That's one of the reasons in my infrastructure plan, I want to look at some alternative ways to finance things rather than just through either taxes or just government funds. I think we need to live within our means, in the federal government. But I want to look at public-private partnerships and some other alternative financing mechanisms that have built incredible things, great bridges, great tunnels, but have done so with a minimum of taxpayer dollars and by leveraging dollars in the private sector. So yeah, absolutely. I also am troubled by the national debt. I'm troubled by the idea that we would just continue to cut people check through stimulus. That is not going to continue to work. Eventually, we're going to run out of money to borrow from China or money in taxes. And we need to get people back to work, and we need to start building things again. And my plan is the only plan that does that for the 10th Congressional District.
Well, and don't you feel like the more debt we build, it's almost like the playground for the far left, right? All these fringe ideas that are starting to gain in prominence. Can you talk about a little bit about some of those ideas that are floating around Congress right now and how to pay for all this?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it before, but you've got, the idea of a value added tax, which they've used in Europe, which is nuts to me. You've also got carbon taxes, which has been soundly rejected by voters in our state and has not been able to be passed by the state legislature, thankfully, yet. And all of these, again, are just ways to try to, it's almost adding insult to injury. The idea that you would have this many people out of work and you would be trying to tax them. My plan for economic recovery, and the analogy I use for it is HIT. It emphasizes getting kind of the engine of the economy started again. The first way is through housing construction. That's the H. And that would be encouraging through common sense reforms and permit streamlining housing construction to get going again. It led us out of the last recession. It's the first line of defense if there is an emergency, as we've seen. It's our shelter in times of emergency, and we're about 250,000 homes short in this state from where we should be. So I'd like to commit to getting and working to get 25,000 more homes built. Infrastructure, as I said, is another way, part of my plan to fight back against the virus and the economic effects. So I want to see all of the potential plans on the table to improve and better connect the South Sound with the rest of Puget Sound, including transportation through ferry passenger only service, increasing the ferry service, as well as building more roads, looking at transit expansion, and finding lots of different ways to better connect the South Sound with the North Sound. And then finally, technology. I, like a lot of my families in the South Sound, were frustrated by the inability of the school districts. I don't blame teachers or certainly not students or parents, but the fact we did not have a plan B when this occurred and they just kind of shut down schools is very frustrated. So I'd like to look at an online platform that would allow schools to move seamlessly between a in-class experience and then a virtual classroom experience, and then also the expansion of telemedicine as a way to better protect against future emergencies, whether they be the virus or earthquakes or anything else.
Wow,
that was a very, very long answer to a very short question.
No, you have a very well thought out plan. I want to ask that you join us one more time, maybe in the next few weeks, because I know I'm going to have some follow-up questions. But as we close out this interview, can you share with the people that would view this this interview why they should vote for you?
Yes, I am the candidate who is focused on the number one issue, and I'm focused like a laser beam on the number one issue facing this country, which is COVID recovery. With all of these people out of work, we have got to find a way to get the economy going again. All of the other issues that we've debated, usually in congressional campaigns, frankly, we don't have the luxury of debating right now. We've got to get people back to work. And I want to be a fierce advocate for that and for the people in this district. I've got the background and experience. I understand how a bill becomes a law, and I am committed to doing my best to serve the people in this district as I have throughout my entire professional career.
Thank you, Jackson. I'm so excited that you're our very first candidate interview, and we'll be talking to you again soon.